Hello friends, we're back. It's week 6 with Peter and Parker, and as we said last week, not a lot's changed. We're here training them today. We had them down at the train station just before. They rode a train for the first time. They're just practicing normal stuff. We're still doing bite work. That's progressing. Nothing has changed. You're still doing article indications with them. That's progressing. Nothing has changed.
Soon to be actual working into
Becoming
tracking, but
becoming real tracking.
we've been working on other things.
Yeah, and we're still socialising the hell out of them. They're about 14 weeks old now, so really still the priority, rather than teaching them anything, is building them into being the type of dog that is capable of learning the things and doing the things that we're going to want them to do later on. So instead of showing you just more of us doing that, we have decided to go long form today and answer a bunch of questions that we've asked people to bring in for us. So we're going to start with the questions that are in the YouTube video of week 5. Week 5, there'll be a card here that you can check that out. But we've got a bunch of questions here. Then we also put that into Instagram, and we've got some questions there that we can answer. We'll go for about an hour or so today, so you can check in, and hopefully I'll be able to timestamp some of these with the questions. You'll be able to scroll along, move around, see what else is happening. For people, for your information on the plan with these puppies, is that we are just raising them. This is our 3rd time doing it together. We've got a pretty good system where Jazz does all the work and I take a very small amount of the credit.
And I lose all my hair or it turns grey by the end of it.
Yeah. And so we did the first 2 were with 2 German Shepherds named Fred and Frank. They're both now working in Victoria Police as general purpose police dogs there. Had quite a lot of success and are both considered, very effective dogs within that unit.
Which is what teed us up for then who Roger and Richard went to.
Yeah, that's right.
Fred and Frank.
That's right. So then Roger and Richard were the next 2 dogs. They were 2 Malinois, 2 black Malinois. And before we even had a chance to approach anybody about those being for sale, we were approached to buy them. They were undercooked. They weren't ready. They weren't finished. And they were sold under that proviso that, they weren't a dog that's ready to be tested. They weren't finished, but they were absolutely on track to be very capable. They were purchased under those conditions, and they've both finished their courses now.
Yep, graduated.
They're both graduated and are working at corrections. Jazz went down and watched it. So we've had a pretty good success rate. We've been very lucky with the dogs that we've got have panned out. A big part of this sort of thing is the genetics of the dog, as I'm sure we'll talk about in this video. But today, because there's nothing super exciting to show you and we get a lot of questions, Jazz and I both, while it's great that people are choosing to follow along and tuning in each week. We're both getting quite a lot of questions about this that is not necessarily achievable for us to be replying to everybody all the time. So we're going to do videos sort of hitting a bunch of the key questions. Let's get into it. So
you've already answered about 3 of them already
I know.
in that.
Yeah. Okay, so the first question is from, let's go right per start. So Shepherd's Pie on YouTube. It's a...
Shepherd's pie, it's delicious.
Yeah, well,
I don't know who this person is, but...
Shepherd's Pie is someone with a German Shepherd that has commented on a bunch of my stuff. Seems like a really nice person. Hello, Shepherd's Pie, whatever your real name is. It says, I can't remember what you said in previous videos, but I'm assuming you're planning on bringing them on until they're ready to be sold as protection dogs, ? What a cool way to earn a living. So yeah, the plan with these guys is these are a little bit different than the other 2. And the other 2 were raised just to be raised for the fun of doing it, and then we'll search for a buyer at the end. There was nobody lined up, and I feel really strongly about doing that. So the business of raised training and selling dogs, especially in Australia, but all around the world, is a little bit of a tricky one because we don't breed dogs, so we don't have a genetic pool that we can say like, no, these dogs are going to work out. These are the dogs. These are the ones. We know we're buying them from people as well, or being given them, or whatever. And so it's a dangerous game to pre-sell these dogs.
Very risky.
Yeah, really risky, because if I get a puppy at 8 weeks old and I say, yep, this is going to turn out to be a police dog. Well, I don't know that. I don't know how that dog's going to pan out, and I sure as hell don't want to be on the hook to provide a dog at a certain price, because anything could happen along the way. One of these dogs might develop a serious injury and need thousands and thousands of dollars worth of surgery that maybe is even more beyond what we would receive for the dogs. And so if we were to do that and now we've already taken payment, then we're going backwards.
Let me tell you, the further along we go, the more and more concerned I get about injury.
Yeah.
It's like when it's time to sell them, they're almost in like
wrapped in a bubble, yeah. And so there's lots of reasons, but mostly it's that you just can't control the outcomes of these dogs. It's a huge dice roll when you get a dog that's going to be what you think it's going to be. Especially, almost every dog that we've gotten has been a relatively it's an outcross, right? So these guys especially are a big outcross. We don't know what they're going to pan out like. We can make educated guesses, we can hope for the best, but we don't actually know. So I don't like the idea of ever putting myself in a position where I have to provide a dog. I don't like being in the position, especially having been the the end user of this type of thing. So like having been in special forces, the idea of providing somebody something that I don't think is adequate to the role that they're doing, the task that they need it for, that makes me sick. And I also have to put food on the table for my kids. So I made a decision pretty early in my career never to do that. So the plan with all the dogs that we've had in the past and with these ones is that we just raise them, we show people what we're doing, we do the best job that we can, we raise them with a certain intent in mind. And if they turn out to be suitable for that, we then say, hey, they're available and they cost this much. And if there's a purchaser that wants them, we don't care really who that is, what agency or whether it's a private individual, they can reach out to us along the way and offer us money. Or when they're ready, we'll contact people and say, these dogs are ready, do you need a dog? These guys is just a little bit different in that we were approached by a friend of ours, a person who wants to do PSA, which is the Protection Sports Association, which is one of the many and various bite sports that's available, but it's the one we do. This person wants to do that later with the dogs, but because of their work schedule and just timing in life at the moment, aren't in a position to raise a puppy. So asked us to raise a puppy. So we went through all the same concerns about, yeah, but if you want to say for sure this is going to be your dog, that you're going to get one of these, then you're paying, but also we don't know how it's going to turn out. There's all these risks, as we just discussed. But we found a really amicable agreement. The person we're doing it for, she's wonderful. And so we've found an agreement that works for everybody and that we feel safe doing. I won't go into the details of that. It's nothing that fancy, but it's something that we were happy with. It's all care, no responsibility. They are what they are. She's got eyes on us. She trains all the time. This video series is evidence enough that we put in as much effort as can be done. If it's within our skill set to get these dogs over the line to be what we've ultimately decided for them to be, then it will be done if it's within our skill set. And so the goal, the overarching long-term picture with these guys is that they're both being raised identically. All the training is the same within the scope of what we want to train them for, not exactly what we're doing.
And small differences between the dogs, but the trajectory is the same.
They remain individuals. We train them individually, but the goal with them is that they're going to learn to track, they're going to learn to bite as if they're going to do real world biting as well as PSA, because in the development stages there really isn't a lot that I would do, well there's nothing I would do differently from one dog to another. They're going to be tracking, they're going to be biting, they're going to learn obedience. And so the tracking of the one that we ultimately decide goes to our friend that's going to take on these dogs, that one, the tracking will perhaps, maybe she'll do tracking, maybe she'll want to do it, but it will be redundant.
Maybe I'll borrow the dog and do some tracking with
it. We'll just tracking. And the remaining dog will be sold to whoever wants it. Now, we always, one of the reasons why we do this, and I feel so strongly about it as well, is you just never know. Maybe you fall in love with one of these dogs and you want to keep it. Maybe Jazz decides, but maybe Jazz decides along the way, this is the dog that I want. This is the dog that I want to compete with. Maybe I decide that.
I think you're a little closer than me, bro.
But
he's in love with one.
Yeah, but I love them all. I think that's an important part of raising a dog.
Made me look bad.
Yeah, but I think that's an important part of raising a dog is that you have to give your heart to them a little bit, so that because that's how they're meant to be raised, and that's the difference between having a dog raised by someone like us versus buying a green dog from a kennel. Is you in some ways you're going to get a better product buying a green dog from a kennel. It's likely to be more off tap. It's likely to have many it's going to be ready to hit the work. It's not going to have any problems because there's no one to create those problems, but what it's not going to have is livability usually, and then that's the really hard part to put in.
And I think it's really important to develop a relationship with them so they understand and know what it feels like to have a relationship, but not to the point where they're then only going to be able to have a relationship with me and like a bit obsessive or something about it, but more in the sense they know how to develop a relationship, what it feels like, so when they go to their next handler, they can develop a relationship with them as well. If you've never understood what love and affection and what a good relationship is, chances are you're either going to have unhealthy relationships down the track, and this is humans, dogs, whatever, or you're going to really struggle to form one at all.
Agreed.
So it's like, although I have a very hard time at certain stages with these puppies, and I don't often talk about the love, the affection, the little puppy stuff that I do with them, as opposed to Patty might make that a little bit more prominent or whatever. But they do get plenty of that. They do get everything that they need, not in excess and where they're dependent on me. But it is a big part of it, for sure.
For sure. All right, so let's move on. That's the story.
And yeah, it is a cool way to earn a living. Stressful, but cool.
It is super stressful.
Like, we get to ride one wheels occasionally.
The truth is, though, like, the reality of the situation of raising dogs like this is it's not at the scale at which we're doing it, and in Australia with how much people pay for dogs and stuff, is it's not actually viable, like, as a job. If you actually did the maths on the cost per hour, you're looking at, we're almost negative.
It's embarrassingly low.
Because Jazz puts in, it's a 24/7 job for her. She's raising these dogs. They live at her home. They're in her yard. She's dealing with them 24 hours a day, especially at the moment. They're still learning to manage to get through the night. They're young dogs. They're
early start.
Yeah, they're
2
set
a.m.
off.
today.
They're set off easily. They're spicy little Malinois. So it's an enormous task that she's undertaken. And the money, no matter how much you sell them for, that's reasonable, like you're actually going to get, you're not recovering it. If you didn't love doing it, for us it works out because we enjoy doing it. It keeps us fresh in the skills of raising puppies, and I think that that's one of the things that we are constantly, as dog trainers, whether we're in working spaces or not, we are constantly dealing with giving advice on raising puppies and how to do that. And most dog trainers have only done it a couple of times. They've raised their own dog and they might have a little board and train for a few days here and there. But for us to every year or 18 months or so to see a dog all the way through, I think that's one of the most important things in all dog training, is actually getting to see something all the way through, so that you see, geez, that thing that I did at 8 weeks old and I thought, wow, that was really cool. What did that turn into with my finished dog? Like, what was the end product of that? Did that actually have the effect that I was planning on for it to have, or were there unintended consequences?
Which is why it's really important to then maintain a bit of a relationship, if they're willing, with the handlers that have the dogs that we've owned, which most of them, they do, they keep us up to date on how they're going. If, an issue came up with something, they'll talk to us about it or let us know how they worked through it. And that really pays dividends for raising the next one, because it means if a consistent problem was to come up, we can address it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
I think probably an example of that, say, was the start points for tracking with Fred and Frank. Like the way that
casting thing.
Yeah, the way that they're
turns out
cast.
I was doing it accidentally anyway.
Yeah, but so like our start tracking cues, just out of habit, we taught them, there's a known start point, here it is. And of course with police, that's not how it's going to work. And so just when got feedback from the guys saying, well, we don't actually have a start point, we have to have the dog find the start point, we're like, yep, okay, that's a step, that's just an add-on that we can have ready for the next set of dogs. And the next two started by being able to be cast. And one of the things that I know that corrections do tracking, and especially in the regional areas and whatever, but Roger, who went to the last set, I've seen a lot of tracking dogs in my life. I'm not like a tracking guru, not by any stretch of the imagination, but Roger's probably the best tracking dog I've ever seen in my life. And
I would have loved to go through to the end of that process and really push his limits and see how far he could go.
Yeah, because I think Roger's a very violent dog, had a lot of hatred in his heart, but was also very capable of managing that and was social and affiliative when it was time to be.
Yeah, very loving, but...
Yeah. But really, in his bite work, had a level of vitriol that you don't usually see. He bit to hurt you, not because it was a fun game. But also his tracking was...
phenomenal.
Yeah, phenomenal, and naturally. We always tell the story, one of the places where we'd go to socialise them is it was about 1,500 metre walk that we do, like this big loop around this big park, this big parklands. And we took out Richard, one of the other dogs, and my 2 dogs to just walk together around, do this big loop, just to socialise, move together, see what it's like to just, you know, live like that. Then we put Richard away, got Roger out, and he's off leash following that same 1,500 metre loop that we did, and he tracked us from the previous track. So this was about
no cues. Like I didn't give a command, didn't give any of the leash things because he's off leash. It was just he was told he was free, and in his free liberty time, he chose to track.
Yeah, and 1,500 metres nose to the ground, 100% accuracy.
And at no point was looking to me for reward, going, look, I'm turning on the window, I'm doing it. It was like genuine enjoyment.
Yeah.
Like
and that was multi-surface, like hard surface.
Other dogs running past.
So he was something special, like an incredible tracking dog. Just naturally, just enjoyed it, and then would trade along. All right, should we move on? Next question. All right, Jason, I think that's New Zealand. Jason says to us, would love to know if you have a plan on socialisation. If you do, what does that plan look like? How you build them to be neutral around rando people, dogs, etc. Jazz.
Well, we have a plan, and it first started with trying to film them being reactive and you know, resolving that, which we never really got the footage of that because by the time we set up the scenario, we'd kind of already fixed it.
Yeah.
But one thing that I do when socialising and with socialising I mean to the environment, to people, to dogs, all of those things. To create them as neutral as possible, I try not to use reinforcers like food and toys. I don't want to be bringing their arousal up around things. I want to be keeping them, as you said, neutral. So if you were to have a scale of their arousal, and I kind of want that in the middle, if I'm to reward with food and toys, then their arousal is going to be going at this end. Now, they can be all happy and everything, so to speak, when getting their rewards, but if their arousal is up, it doesn't matter if they're happy, they can quickly transfer over to a different emotion that perhaps I don't want them to have with the environment, the people, or the dogs. So I choose to try not to use food as much as possible. We also use flooding, but we will use food or toys if we need to, but preferably we don't. With these guys, because of the situation we're in and the dogs that we have that we can use for it, we chose to flood them a couple of times, and that worked well. You know, you don't know flooding doesn't work until it doesn't work.
Yeah.
But what do you have to say?
Yeah, I think so. For example, maybe while I'm talking, I could put up the clip, is we just went and rode a tram or a train, right? And we just went one stop. That was all they need. They don't need... I think one of the things with socialisation is people massively overdo it. Yeah, they do way too much.
In there as well.
Yeah, do way too much, go way too many places, do too many things, and that creates like a hyper-awareness to the dog when you go to too many places, or when you might go to a place and have the dog there for a really long period of time, and every second that this puppy is out in the social world, you've got to do the cost-benefit analysis of like, what am I getting from this versus what risks am I taking by doing it? So we just rode the train or the tram and just went one stop, that's enough. We parked kind of in between the stops, walk to one, ride the tram to another, get off there, and then walk back to the car. And in the clip, you'll see that I think on that whole way, you might have given one piece of kibble, and it was after we got off the train. So you probably won't even see it in this clip. It's just here we are, we're on the train. And so it keeps the arousal down, and we want everything just to be like, oh, this is what life is. There's no big deal about this. This is just normal. This is what you do. We ride the train. The thing moves. You end up in a different place. Same as getting in the lift when we then went down from the train platform in the lift. It's just you get in, you go down, and you're fine on the other side of it. We don't need to create big feelings about it. We don't need there to be a draw to it. I don't want that dog thinking, yeah, I want to ride the train because I have positive associations to the train. What I actually want is them just to be like, oh, I ride trains. Yeah. It's no big deal.
Part of it is modelling, right?
Yeah.
So it's like we get on the train, we're not super excited about it. It's just a thing. We're making no big deal. Even if, for example, if you were anxious about getting on the train, or maybe you really love trains and you get excited. If you don't want your dog to be that way, you kind of have to model what you want them to be. So we get on the train and act like it's no big deal. If they look, for example, they didn't, but if they look at the small gap between that and the platform and the train, if they were to look at that and go, oh, I walk past, act like it's no big deal. I make sure the puppy's safe. But if I go, oh, you've seen a big gap. Yeah, it's a big gap. Be careful. But like, it's going to make a thing out of it. So modeling to the dog how you want them to be. I was going to say this other question I just remembered relates in. So it says from Instagram, Jake Peaks. And he said, can you discuss how to best identify when you're over-socialising / generalising? So I was going to tie that in. So the way I think about it is first to consider if you're over-socialising, you need to first understand what the purpose or what your goals with the dog is. And then from there, you need to assess, okay, am I going closer towards reaching that goal, that purpose, or am I going further away from that? And then to figure that out, you kind of have to assess how the dog's responding in situations. And once they've reached the point of, sweet, you're at the point that I want you to have. Like, so you're heading in the right direction all the way, and then like maybe a couple of sessions, you're like, wow, you're doing it. You're doing it, man. Don't necessarily keep going in the same way where you're like, okay, we're constantly working on it. Now it becomes like a background app in your phone. It's running in the background. You know, you might need to bring it up occasionally where you're like, oh, yeah, you haven't been around that in a while. It pricked your attention a little bit more. Sure, readdress it. But it just goes to the background. Like, you're aware of it. Yeah. But if you consistently keep working on it, you're potentially going to overdo it.
Yeah.
That's how I consider it. But you first have to understand the purpose and the goals for the dog, and if you're heading in that direction.
Yeah.
I have a squeaky chair.
Yeah, well, you'll have to manage it.
I might change it.
Yeah, no, you just got to sit dead still.
God.
You got to sit dead still. Okay, so
we got a
question from Ben Filippi, which is a wonderful name.
Filippi.
Thoughts on playing fetch games with multiple dogs? Would this water down the handler association with play? So I take by that you mean both at the same time. So I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that at all.
It would be rare that I do, and it would be very limited if I do. So we'll use these pups as an example. So with Peter and Parker, I think I've done it once. I wanted to just sort of see how they go, but obviously it's not necessarily something I recommend because there's so much that could go wrong. But I know the consequences and then know how to fix it in case it happens. But sometimes if one's like lacking in a little bit of drive for it, just say for the ball, but the other one's like pretty good, it can kind of help bring the other one up, but there's so many downfalls to it. And if you don't understand the consequences and then know how to resolve those issues that could be caused, then it's so not worth doing. It didn't cause any issues. It was totally fine. Not necessarily worth doing again, but yeah, it would be very rare and very limited if I did that. And it's probably going to be a follow-up, like what are some of the consequences? Look, just a couple would be perhaps they're going to be overly now competitive and could cause a very big issue between them. Could cause like resource guarding sort of thing where they're like, no, now I must compete for everything. It could make them want to play with each other and not me. Like, you know, there's a myriad of problems. So it's typically not something I would recommend. But I won't lie, have done it once with these guys. Think I probably did it maybe once or twice with others. But again, it's not something that I actually really did much because it's just too much risk.
Yeah.
But was fine at that age on that day when I chose to do it.
Useful to sort of kickstart one puppy if the other one's pretty good at it and the other one's not, useful for that. But for the most part, it involves a lot of risk. I think that the issue with putting any two dogs in competition with each other in some form of drive expression is that there's going to be a winner and there's going to be a loser.
Exactly.
And so for the winner, great. But for the loser, now he knows that he's less than.
Yeah.
And that's not a helpful thing for them to ever find out. We never want them to think that they can't do it. In terms of, you know, a retrieve, getting something, we want to always make that achievable. We want to make it difficult but achievable, and that's impossible when there's two of them.
And then if one brings it back, he's the winner, the other one doesn't, what do you do with the other one? Do you go like, sorry bro, you're not good enough because that's not good? But do you then praise him for not getting the ball? Because now he's like, oh, the ball's not important. So it's like I said, so many risks, but for what I needed on that day, it was fine, it was suitable. But yeah, it's just typically not something I recommend. But what I do with multi-dogs and what I do later with these guys, I can run sessions with one brother, with one dog or even my own dog, while another one's at free liberty next to us. And then I can go, cool, man, like here's all your commands, here's all your reward markers and your rewards, which is exactly the same as the sibling that's sitting right there and my dog. This one is not interrupting.
Yeah.
When I'm done with this one, I go, cool, man, you're free. Off you go. And then I go, all right, man, like, here, let's go. It's you and me. And I can literally use the reward I just had for that dog with the next dog. And there's no competition, there's no conflict, there's no, like, interrupting and now, like, hey, no, I want to keep working. There's clarity. So that's what I do later. And in case anyone's seen videos of me doing that, it's different to just playing fetch with both dogs at once. I can play a one fetch game here, one fetch game there. They're totally separate.
Yeah.
But there's no conflict and there's a lot to build up on that. But
yeah,
that
you need that prior to, you need the ability to do that with just affection. Like, no, hey, he's getting pat and you're not, before you would dream of throwing the ball.
There's so many steps in that to build up. But yeah, that's probably going to be a whole nother video.
Okay, Jamarcus 182 says, what's your process with marker words, clickers, etc. at this point? Do you teach them commands right away, or do you just focus on them being happy, social little dudes and luring, free shaping, and then teaching the official commands in a few months?
Yeah, happy social little dudes.
Yeah.
That's pretty much all we need at this stage.
So they're getting their markers loaded. We were just talking about how we start with a clicker.
Ready to add a few more markers in because it's like, oh man.
So we start with the clicker for food, you know, and so like with all loading, all markers in dog training, I think it's the same way. We start with, for us anyway, we start with the clicker for food because it's so salient, it's so punchy, it creates such a powerful response. And later, we're going to use that when we are shaping. We tend to use a clicker for free shaping because you can really capture those moments in time. But right now, we're using it that when we go out, Jazz has the food, she has the clicker, so that if something goes wrong, we can create like a very significant event that changes the dog's mind in that moment, that significantly changes the arousal, the mindset, the emotion, all of that, because the clicker has been so powerfully charged.
Going back to what we spoke about before, when I think it was that one piece of kibble one time doing the train thing, I didn't give the marker that's the same as the clicker. I gave a different marker. It still means food, but I have a second marker that means like, here's one piece of kibble.
Yeah.
Like there's no arousal with that. I go like, and that's, I don't want to do it too loud because they're over there.
Yeah, they can hear
so I just make that noise and then I give them one piece of kibble and that's it. So then they're just like, cool, no worries. Like they're just free again. There's no massive increase in arousal. So that's what I did there, but very different to the clicker. And there's many reasons why I do that. But it's when I need to use food, but maintaining a low arousal.
Yeah. And so as a sort of overarching theme with our markers, we start with the clicker, but then we will have the verbal that we just use for training a lot. We start playing with them right away. Jazz is playing with them. I'm working with them like at the pointy end that is going to look like bite work. And we don't add any markers to that stuff until they're doing it the way that we want. So have you added any markers to getting stuff?
When I can tell they're having a day where it's like it's going to be a successful, say, fetch game or something, then if I'm throwing it, actually, no, I haven't done it with throwing it yet. That would be the same as if they're taking a ball from me. The origin of the reward is me. I haven't introduced that at all. But what I have introduced is I've thrown it, the ball's stopped, the dog's like, oh, I want it, and I'm holding them here, and then I go, break, and they go get it. So that means like there is an object already out there, it's static, and then when I say break, you have permission to go get it and bring it back. So that one I've introduced. That one I feel like is, with these pups at this stage, easier to predict and more secure that they're going to actually follow through with that. Because if they're engaged that entire time watching it and I then give them permission to go and like let go of them, they're going to go. But if I throw that ball and like, they're like started chasing it, it looked like they were into it, but then they run off that way, oh man, like it's, it's a little bit different. So that's why I chose to do that one first.
So I think that's the gist with markers is whatever the marker is going to predict, that needs to be in place.
Yeah.
So very often when people get a young dog, they start wanting to load their markers right away because we always talk about how important that is, blah, blah,
with
blah.
Roger and Richard at your seminar.
Yeah.
sober. I haven't loaded them up.
Not going to happen. Yeah,
they weren't ready. Not enough food drive.
That's right. And so I did a seminar here in Sydney, and Jazz had just picked up Roger and Richard like 2 days earlier, and we brought them in to show a marker loading session. And I can't remember who was who, but the way it always starts...
We were going to try to have the markers loaded first, and I said, they're not ready. We're just going to have to do it there.
Yeah, so then... And I said, OK, cool, no worries, we'll do it in front of people.
Test them first in the environment if they're even going to take food.
Yeah, so Jazz came in, we've got this on film somewhere, comes in, shows the dogs around, like, hey, you're in this brand new environment, there was 80 people in a room, and then goes, do you want this food? And one of them very hurriedly was like, hell yeah, I want it. And we go, sweet, we can do the marker loading session in this space, in this place, at this time. And the other one said, hey, you've settled in just as much. Do you want this food? And he's like, yeah. And we go, okay, sweet. You can chase some food around in here. You can have a good time with that food, but we're not loading the marker because what the marker predicts doesn't yet exist. Yeah. And so I think that one of the places people go wrong is, food, you can start loading markers kind of right away for the most part because you can build the drive and very quickly you can start loading that. But with toys, you don't know like how invested in the game they're going to be. So we want to get them really invested in the game without any markers. And the issue as well that I think, now this is avoidable if you do it right, but most people, the marker doesn't just mean you can have it. It also means you can't have it until I tell you that. Yeah. And so now you're putting control work on this young dog. Control. Yeah, an impulse control on a little dog where you might not want that impulse control just yet. Yeah. So,
and let me be clear, like when we hold them there a little bit, like they're trying to go forward. I'm not trying to control their impulse. I'm trying to load them up a little bit. So like that's different. That's not trying to have them hold or stay all on their onesie. That's like trying to coil them back and then send them off with more explosive power. So I know it might look like you're trying to control the impulse, but yeah, it's a different situation.
Yeah. All right. I feel like we answered that one. This one's from Luxury Dragons.
I feel like I was going to say something there and I forgot. Oh, but sorry. When I bring that up later, just randomly.
Yeah, we'll slot it in. All right, so this one's from Luxury Dragons, which is a wonderful YouTube name. It says, if one of the puppies had extreme drives at this age, what are some key things that would be different in the way you're raising them? I.e., if the pup showed extreme possession and strong emotion towards other people, like barking on the leash in one-off situations, but fine in crowds of people. So they have all that.
I was like, nope, I do exactly the same thing because you just described the dogs.
Yeah. So the thing is, these are, I think as well, for people who have raised Malinois puppies, these are very typical Malinois puppies.
Like average, or not, maybe they're above average, I don't know.
Yeah,
but like,
they're typical. Yeah. They're nice.
I expect this.
Yeah, they're very spicy. And so spicy is a funny one that brings up a lot of people like, what do you mean by that? And I just mean that they're fiery. Again, that's not a very good explanation, but
they're sharp.
They're on a hair trigger. They've got big feelings about things. They're super drawn to things. They're constantly playing with their environment, and not playing with their environment as in rolling in the grass and chasing butterflies. They do that. Yeah, and we just did a bunch of that with them. But what they're doing when they're playing in their environment is just pushing buttons and finding out, where do I fit in all of this?
Yeah, they push my buttons.
And when I see a person or another dog or something that is new and novel to me, I'm just going to experiment with my behaviour and see what happens on the other side of that.
What happens? Okay, when I go and pull into the leash, what happens? When I turn around and look at you, what happens? They test it all.
Yeah. So the question as it relates to extreme drives, now I wouldn't describe anything that they have presently as extreme. It's just nice. They're really good, like well-balanced dogs. They're as we'd expect. But they're different, as we spoke about last week. One is much more possessive and likes to have things, and the other is much more, dopaminergic, where he's less into having it and much more into getting it.
Bro science.
Yeah. So my dopaminergic versus serotonin-based dog. I don't want to...
Bro science of the neuroscience. It's okay.
But so they are really different. They have big feelings about things. And what we do is any of those big feelings and any of those, like, I won't call them extreme drives, but very highly expressed drives, if it's at something we want, we cultivate it. We go, hell yeah, and we want to push it and we want to build it and we want to try and, encourage it to be expressed. if it's at something we want and the conditions are correct. If it's not...
Oh, I remember the thing.
What is it?
Oh my gosh.
Say it now.
Oh, I just forgot.
Oh my God.
And my hip just cracked. Oh my God.
So if it's not at something we want, can we then go, okay, can we redirect this into something that we want? Is that possible? Or can we, how do we explain to you, like, hey, that's not going to fly. That's not going to have the effect that you want. Or the button that you're trying to push is not pushable via this. And so we start exposing them to things. And as Jazz alluded to earlier, with those drives of barking and sort of lunging at people and crowds and other dogs and stuff like that, with little puppies like this who have no nerve issues, it's just that they like to experiment with their environment, we tend to just flood them through that kind of stuff, right? Like we just sort of go, hey, that's not the behavior. And you're trying to bark at that dog to get some kind of reaction out of that dog. We make sure that with the dogs that we provide are not going to react, and we let them bark it out. And just, this is how it's going to go. Same as when they got nervous feelings about walking up on a person, which they did when we got them, which is, now we couldn't even replicate that to get footage to show you because we addressed it and fixed it so quickly. But we just go, hey, that's not going to have an effect. And that behavior will go extinct pretty quickly because they're just trying to see, like, is this reinforced? What does this have? And we go, no, it's punished because it removes you from the environment. It doesn't promote the environment or whatever. So while I wouldn't say any of them have extreme drives, we're still working through the drive expressions that they have, showing them what's appropriate, what's not. You sending me a message about what
I just remembered, so rather than like have a brain explosion and interrupt you.
Tell us now.
Back on the markers, I said, but I realised it might have been a fleeting passing comment thingo, but I should say more about it. When some days I can go, yep, today you're ready for me to hold you there and say break and you go get it. Some days, like after that, they're not suitable because their drive is just different. On that day, if they're not ready, I just don't use it that session. So when I've used it in one session, it doesn't mean I now have to use it in every single session. Yes, eventually it's consistent. It's in all the sessions, blah, blah, blah. But when I'm still trying to load it and it's dependent on their arousal and their drive level and where they're at mentally that day, then I can't expect me to say it and it to cause the effect that I want because we haven't developed it yet. Yeah. It's happening. We're in that process. So if they're not in the right state of mind or the right arousal, then I just don't use it that day. And it's totally fine. You're not going backwards in the training. You're choosing the right path to be successful. Yeah. Because if I do it on a watered down version day, then I'm creating a watered down version marker and I don't want that. So don't feel like you're ever going backwards when you in the process of loading your markers and it's just not suitable to do it one day, you know. So there we go. Okay.
You did it. So our next one is from user name, it's unpronounceable. It says, will you do cognition testing on these pups the way Cameron Ford does? So probably not. I mean, we probably, like if Cam's around and we get a chance.
Very interesting. And,
and super into that. I think it's awesome, but it's not something we typically do. I think that we are pretty in tune with the puppies, as we've talked about. They're both very different. We give them their individual needs and we adapt the training to them individually. If Cam is in Australia again and comes by here and we have the opportunity to do it, fuck yeah, why not? But it's not, for us, that's not a part of what we do. If I ever get the opportunity to learn that really properly, I've never had the opportunity to do that. Maybe it becomes the cornerstone of everything we do, but it's just not in my wheelhouse right now. Yeah.
It's just not on the cards right now.
Yeah.
With a lot of other focuses.
Yeah. Okay, so then probably the last one from YouTube that we can answer is from Patrick Smith. It says, what is your determining criteria for advancing the puppy? In other words, how does the puppy show you without a doubt he's ready? Is it back to the 80-20 principle of like 80% success, 20% failure? Thanks, guys. Loving the content.
Depends what we're working on. Like, for example, marker loading, I wouldn't go 80-20 because I don't want them ever not going out. So that would be like, I really have to judge where their arousal is at and, you know, where their headspace is at. If we're in a suitable environment, have they been in this one before? You know, all of that plays a role. Were they awake half the night barking and maybe they're going to run out of energy a little bit quicker or something? Like, there's so many factors, but now I forgot the question. But that would determine how I go about that session. But in terms of obedience, it's like when I can see the dog has an aha moment, but that's not very definitive. Like, how do I define this aha moment? I need good footage of this, but it's like I feel that I can see in the dog when they go, oh, like I've got it. Even if it's not the most impressive, fastest, like glamorous repetition, you can see they just I got goosebumps thinking about it. I love this part of the training. Shut up. But you can see that, like, things clicked, you know, and I see that in them reaching the criteria I've set for a session, but I also just see that in their posture. Like, they just hold themselves a little bit differently on that following rep, or even sometimes, like, they pause. Like, they've done it correctly, I mark, and they go to get it, and they're just like, oh, like, they have a moment before they even take the reward. Sometimes they're like, they think about it, they process it, and then they're like, holy shit. And then they play the best bloody game of their life, or they, like, eat that food, and they're like, yeah, let's do the next rep. Like, that's how I gauge a lot of the stuff. But then how do you put that into words, like, to pass that on to other people? Knowing your criteria, and when they're doing it, I would say consistently, then you can increase or add a new criteria, but be flexible with the previous criteria. Because, you know, if you're adding something and making it harder, you sometimes have to make some of the other things easier. But consistency, I'd say, as well as me reading the dog. But reading the dog is very specific to whatever dog you're working.
I think on progression, exactly as you said, when the dog is like, oh, got it, you got to keep progressing.
Because otherwise they get stuck. So what I was worried about with Red Collar, what's he?
Peter.
Roger. Roger, is I could see he picked up the article indication really quickly, but then in the next couple sessions, I was just building a little bit of duration, but he was almost a little bit frantic, where he was like, dude, what's next? And I was like, oh, I'm going to need to progress a little bit quicker with him, and then go back on some other sessions, tidy up a little bit as we go, like, so almost two pathways running simultaneous, because he needs the next step or he can end up frantic. But then Pete Parker is like, he needs the next rep, but it's not necessarily helpful. He needs to solidify what he's just learned and then progress.
So, I think with each dog, however it comes to be and whatever it looks like with the dog, you've got to be able to go, okay, you've got this step, be there, be comfortable for a period, but you want them becoming frustrated pretty quickly, and then going, as soon as they show you, like, hey, I'm frustrated, you have to progress. Because if they work through that frustration and settle on the other side of it, then that's what the behavior is to them. They're like, okay, well, this is it, and they won't offer you the next bit. So when you're teaching via those successive approximations, like a little bit and then a little bit more, you've got to, if the dog shows you I'm ready to progress, and that usually looks in the form of frustration in the behaviour.
Or anticipation.
Anticipation if you're building.
Anticipation's good, but you have to do something with it, or it becomes a problem. You got to keep moving, because otherwise they can just settle and go, yep, this is it. And that happens especially once you start naming behaviours, which I think is why we don't name behaviours until pretty late. Because once it's got a name, it's sort of measurable by the dog, and the dog's like, okay, like, this is what it is. Like, this is the picture. You're now slapping a label on it and putting a frame around it. It's done. When you have to go back and address it, it's a little bit harder than if you've left that frame open and can add pain.
All right. Carrying on. Here you go. What language is the word aqui, and what does it mean? I believe Jazz uses it as a marker.
So how it's spelled, incorrect. So it's spelled AQUI, just, you know, for your reference. It's Portuguese. So it means here. I do jiu-jitsu. My professor is Brazilian. So he speaks Brazilian Portuguese. Obviously he speaks English too, but I have decided to learn Brazilian Portuguese, so it was just a way that I could practice. I also occasionally say some other things in Portuguese to my dogs. My neighbours never have any idea what I'm saying, which is probably for the best. But it's just Portuguese. I teach them some lifestyle commands and lifestyle cues in Portuguese as well. but then typically their formal cues will be in English. So any weird word that you probably don't know what it is, well, actually, it could be Brazilian Portuguese, German, Dutch, French.
Yeah, it's
got a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
I'm multilingual.
Yeah, we just use a bunch of noises.
I mostly know swear words in those other languages. Yeah. But yeah, it just means it means the same as the clicker. So that is food from me, and it's high arousal. So I've got a clicker, food from me, high arousal. Aqui, food from me, high arousal. A whistle, food from me, high arousal. The reason I have a whistle is because I didn't have my voice, remember that time? I literally had no voice. My vocal cords were damaged, so I had no way, and a clicker couldn't hear on the other side of the field in wind. So that was a sudden, I actually need to train with a whistle for once. So, but it's quite handy. And then the is their food from me, but no, like low arousal, one piece of food. And then they've got all their toy ones as well, which there's a variety of those. But that's what aqui is.
Same person, D'Artagnan, 89. How do you find out if you have Parvo in your area or an area is Parvo free? Call the vets. That's the main thing, is you just stay
Call the vets
with
or
the
your
vets.
council, if you have a pound sort of thing.
Yeah.
I found out when I went to the vet, but the council contacted the vet, I think, because the vet gave it to the council. Like, I think someone took it to the vet, and then from that suburb went to the pound. They then realised it had Parvo, so they let the vet know.
Yeah.
So vets would know if they've had the cases. Otherwise, they may not know. Unless they've heard it in the grapevine, they may not know what else is going around. But
that's your best point of contact. Call the vet. You don't need to speak to the vet. You speak to the receptionist, the vet nurse, or whoever. Like, they know how many cases are you getting in, where are they from, that sort of stuff.
And you just got to remember, though, it's not like a current thing. Like Parvo, stays in the ground for like forever, 8 years or something.
Yeah.
Like, so if you've just moved to the area 4 years ago, there could still be contaminated areas where there was Parvo, unless they do, like it was in a dog park where this dog was or something or other, which one of the many reasons I wouldn't go to a dog park. But I think they did a whole decontamination of that dog park specifically because they like tested and isolated. There was but it's risk. But in other videos we've weighed up and explained why we do certain things and the risk cost. What is it? Cost benefit analysis.
So in this area where we are, it's pretty low risk of Parvo. Of course, it exists, but very, very low risk. And so we're mostly on hard surfaces. Exactly as you say, it stays in the grass for a really long time. So when we're socialising in this very urban, built-up area, we're mostly on hard surfaces anyway. It's not a big deal. I've been doing it in this area since I've been in dogs and never had an issue. I've had dogs get Parvo, but they arrived with it from a different place. And so it's not like there's no Parvo in the area at all, but it's very unlikely. And when, exactly as we've said a million times, when we do the cost-benefit analysis, for us, it's not something that we worry about overly. We get the vaccines and all that.
And I do clean the kennels, their yard pens, spray my yard. It's not a promo, I'm not associated with them, but F10. You look on the back, there's a certain dilution for different things. One of them is for Parvo.
Right.
It's a very rich, that's not the word. It's
strong.
It's not diluted very much, but it's specific for Parvo. So I'll spray their yard pens, their kennels and things like that. Just to be on the safe side, but I could be walking anywhere, not with dogs and just around, and walk it back into my yard. Yeah, exactly.
So weigh up the risk. All right, so the next one, Murphy Emmett's. What are your go-to confidence building exercises? So we don't really have anything specific, hey?
What's funny is I thought about that for me. I was like, so what I'm working on, it's not all about me. My bad.
We don't really have any specific exercise beyond the box. And look, I know it's one of the questions that's going to come up later on.
Play, but I can't do that until they have a solid game developed. Like they really have the drive to want to play and understand a little bit about stimulus. And like if I'm going to provide a stimulus, nothing bad's going to happen to you. So we have to have a trust relationship. But play box work.
Yeah.
It's like
But even then, so like
genetics plays a massive
yeah, exactly. And I think initially it's modeling. You show the dog strength, it'll want to show you strength back. But I think you've got to show the dog what you want, provide it a safe base from which to return, and then it will feel confident to go out and experiment with behaviour. I think
what we're working on at the moment a lot is them having the confidence to go further and further and further away from me until the point I really need a whistle because they're 2 football fields away.
Yeah, well, that's what we want, is them to be not so inwardly focused that they need the handler present, but enough that they're like, hey, do you have anything for me? No? Okay, I'm going to go do my own thing.
Yeah. And they check in. I like them checking in every now and then, but not out of insecurity, just to go like, you keeping up or what, bro? Come on, walk faster, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Dude, when they look at you and you're like, they think I walk slow, I'm a little offended.
But so confidence building exercise specifically is like the best ways to build confidence is through play, and then, you know, like rambunctious kind of games, which we do a little bit, but not so much at the moment. We've got just down here, you know, all the bottles and the balls, and we just put all that out and convince them by throwing things to the other side of it, scatter feeding food in it to just walk over different surfaces, engage with different things. And then
one of the key things is doing it, anything you do with confidence building, doing it in high arousal and out of that arousal. Like you've got to hit both ends, and heck, it's a spectrum, like go somewhere in the middle too. Yeah. But just because they can do something in high arousal doesn't mean that they're going to be okay with it or have the confidence in low arousal, right? So it's definitely important to address both. In fact, like sometimes if they're in such high arousal, some dogs will have a harder time dealing with something because it's high arousal. So that could go from like, yeah, the ball, oh my God, sudden anxiety. It's still high arousal, you know? So if they're low arousal, that can look all smooth, but if you go up, sometimes that's why you could come across a problem, just because of that arousal level. It's, understanding your dog's arousal and being able to recognize that, and then into like later controlling that pays dividends. Like it's a huge part. In fact, one of my friends over in Canada mentioned that to me. She sent me an email like, oh, you've really helped me with these things, and understanding arousal and learning how to control that and work with your dog with that is, has made a huge difference in a game.
All right, D'Artagnan's 89 also asks, what kind of harness are you using on them, and why do you like that one? Well, it's made by Easy Dog, I think. Where is it? It's over there somewhere. Go grab it. Dad will go get it. We don't put a lot of thought into it. It's just a basic puppy harness. We want something that doesn't restrict them, and also they feel pretty free and comfortable in. We wear the one that goes across the front because we do want them pulling into it. Oh, Jesus, calm down. She's just coming back. So Jazz is here with the harness now.
Gentle.
Yeah, you go back to your couch.
Up. Sorry I scared you, but we're not at home. Lay down. Oh man, you should see Parker. He is sleeping upside down, legs open, mouth open.
Like that. So these are the harness that we use, only because they're easy to get, they're cheap.
In fact, I think I've been given these. Yeah. Gifted 3 different sizes. The blue and reds do not match their collars. It's just the blue, red and blue are all different sizes.
Yeah. We did have the right ones at one point. I bought the right colours at one point. But they're like, I think the thing with these kind of harnesses is what I like to use. My dog uses the same one, and they're not that expensive. They're like 20 odd bucks because they're not going to last long in this thing. They're going to be cycling through this pretty quick. And then I've got a bucket over there full of harnesses and collars and all kinds of stuff. And when I have people come through here, whether it's club members or clients or whatever, and they're like, they're in the wrong harness inevitably, and I go, here, have this, and they're like, oh, can I pay you? Like, no, just give it back to me because it's only going to fit your dog for the next 6 weeks.
Like they're already in their second, almost in the third harness already.
Yeah. So that's what we use. Nothing crazy, nothing fancy. Later in life, you know, we'll probably use something more significant. What I use on my dog is one of the Ray Allen, you know, full body tactical kind of jonos. Whatever is appropriate. I don't overthink it too much. Here's one from Jai Chang. What do you think is the best age separation between an older dog present versus getting a new puppy? I don't know, like that's really dog dependent. Your older dog, depending on what it's like. I don't know that there is a right age. I'll give you the same spiel my mum gave me when I was looking to have a second kid, right? So I'm number 4 of 5. And my brother, who's the eldest, is 10 years older than me, and my sister, who's the youngest, is 10 years younger than me. So there's 20 years in between. And there's a bunch of others in there as well. And so when I was talking to my mum about having a second child and asked her, because she's had kids at every interval from like 1 year, 3 years, 4 years, 10 years, right? And I asked her which was the easiest to manage, and she said they're all hard. There isn't a right answer.
Different reasons.
They're just hard for different reasons. And so I think it's the same with getting a second dog. If you've got a dog already, depends on what that dog is like, is going to determine whether you should get another one. But what I would say is I wouldn't get another dog unless the dog that you have has all the bits and pieces that you want. And so you need like the control and the lifestyle and all of that. Otherwise, you're teaching both at the same time, which is fine. You can totally do. Jazz is doing those 2 puppies right now. But if you've got one that understands its markers and its lifestyle, and you can tell it, like, now's not your time, go away, that's going to make life way easier for raising the puppy.
So I don't know if you skip forward to the next one. There's a part 2 to that question. Caveat. Older dog has some stranger danger tendencies that you don't want to pass on, right? Pass on to the puppy. So what I'd say with this is, Genta, she's a terrible dog for puppies to learn from in certain aspects. She is reactive. Yeah, I'm talking about you, not to you. She's reactive. She's reactive to some sounds and things like that. She's come a long way, but there are certain things I wouldn't want the puppies to pick up on. I mean, something as simple as it would be annoying, right? She chases birds in the backyard, but she barks at them to make them go away, right? Not one of the puppies I've had has learnt that from her. None of them do it. They lift their head up and go, oh, there's a bird that laid on the deck next to me. They go back to sleep, right? So I'm careful to make sure that they're not learning things. But what I'd say is if, you know, an older dog has some stranger danger tendencies, if you know you can, and like with this, let's just say it's a problem that you know 100% you can resolve, I would resolve it, then get a puppy. Like if you know you can resolve it and you know your time frame, I would do that first, then get a puppy.
They're about to wake up.
Parker's talking to himself. He does it when he's like woken up and tries to go back to sleep, tells himself a little bedtime story. Resolve it, then get a puppy. That would be my suggestion. I wouldn't want to be trying to deal with a problem that one dog has and risk another dog like seeing that. But then if there's no issues, or if that's just an ongoing long-term issue, like sometimes when she's reactive to things or whatever, it's just something I've got in the back of my mind. But I manage it. So I don't have them interacting with her until the puppies have a certain level of understanding about some markers, some basic things. She already has that. She can be off in the distance and I go, hey, don't hassle her, like teach them social etiquette, things like that. But yeah, it's easier if you just don't have a problem dog before you get a puppy.
All right. Sean White's canine. How do you determine an adequate frequency for bite work for each dog? Pretty simple.
We spoke about that with Peter.
Yeah, like as much as they need, but not as much as they want. That's really it. Like you always want them wanting more. You don't want to saturate them. You don't want to. It's like, so for example, at club here now, like with some of the more adult dogs that know what they need to know. We're not looking to build any power. We'll do our training session and then the decoy will get in a chair, literally in a roller chair, and we just let the dogs download, right? Because they only get to do bite work once or twice a week. We're happy with the desire for it, so we just let them download and it makes them a lot easier. Yeah, an outlet, and like, here you go, bite for the next 5 minutes, just crunch out, and so that they're not always needing more. But in development, you absolutely want them always wanting more. So we do as much as they need so that they're not driving Jazz crazy, but also so that they're not frustrated and risking, looking for an outlet that then becomes inappropriate and developing a habit that we don't want to happen.
Or just get frantic in the mind, which I saw a couple of times. Like, I felt like, which it can change as he ages, but with Peter, I remember how I said, like, I think I'm going to need to do a little bit of bite work at home on a particular thing to really satisfy him and put him in a Zen state so he can just feel at peace, and then it'll help him settle. And we've done it a couple of times because you can just see he's just not like set in his mind. He's just like, oh my gosh, I just need to do this thing. Yeah. But unless I provide that for him, he can't do it. So I gave him like this particular like triangle wedgie toy looking thing or whatever. And just let him have an outlet on that. But like proper, as in he was biting full, everything like that, doing all the same stuff we do in bite work. Needed maybe 5 minutes of that, and then he was like, okay, I'm good. It's like when you have a snack and you're really, really hungry, and then you're like, okay, I'm good now. Yeah.
All right, this one's from Azuki and Mitch. Are you using the box to train them? So no. The funny truth is we actually don't really do much box work because of, or Annie. I think we did some with Frank maybe.
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure I started with Frank, did about half a dozen sessions, decided it actually wasn't necessary for him, but we've got it in case it becomes necessary.
So because
you understood the foundations of it. So if I had to bring it in, but we thought it was going to be helpful to settle his mind, but we found other ways.
So all the benefits that come from the box, and for people who have never done any tracking or that kind of work, it's just tracking. And so if you're doing an article indication, you're doing the box, but you don't have the box. So all the exact same principles, all the exact same learning outcomes, the pathways, the measurable things along the way, everything is the same, but there's no box. We're just doing it absent the box. One of the reasons why we encourage people to use the box is because it really makes it easier for a lay person to wrap their head around. But and all the benefits that come of the box.
And it's an unimportant skill.
Yeah.
Like having your head in a box.
Yeah. They're kind of just the benefits that come of tracking. So we get that from tracking. If we hit a problem, then yeah, for sure. But for the most part, we tend not to because of the amount of tracking that they do.
Yeah, and if I think that we're going to come across, like sometimes you're like, oh, hey, Pat, I think we're going to come across a problem in the next couple of weeks. You know, I can see this building up sort of thing. And we'll address it as it goes. But if I think I'm going to see a problem where I'm like, okay, how am I going to work through that? Okay, I'm going to want the box a known exercise to them. Cool. I'm going to show them what the box is. Do half a dozen. He's playing with his water bowl. Half a dozen sessions to go like, cool, you understand. Pressure's on. Keep your head in the box. Pressure turns off. Food in. Once I understand that, cool. I've got the foundation. So then, when that problem comes up later, I can use it. Mm-hmm. But it's really like if I couldn't address it in the article indication, that would be when. But really, I think Frank was the only one, and we never ended up really following through with it.
Yeah, because
it
serves a purpose. If you don't need the purpose, you don't do it. So I'm flicking through most of these questions, and I think we've answered most of the rest of them in one way or another throughout everything that we've asked in other questions. So I feel like that's probably the best spot to leave it. Puppies are waking up. I can hear them starting to clatter around over there in their crates.
Throwing their water bucket.
So we've had our very quiet period, and now things are about to go madness. So we'll wrap it up. Anything you want to add?
Not that I can think of.
Okay, well, that's it. So thank you very much for sticking with us all the way through. We're really enjoying making this stuff. I won't lie, it's a giant fuck around trying to film all of this. And the goal, and for anybody that's made it this far into the video, it can only be because you're interested in what we're doing. And the goal ultimately with these puppies is that we will, beyond selling them, we're filming a tutorial series on how to raise a puppy. And it's not that our market is probably you if you're watching, but it's not like brand new pet dog people, and it's not super experienced working dog people. It's people on their first or second like high drive dog. And it's like, how are we going to keep all that drive intact? Turn this dog into a dog that I can do really cool stuff with. Maybe that's bite work, maybe that's agility, maybe whatever it is that you want to do with your dog that requires the dog to have a bunch of drive that it's willing to express. To do that and then also be your pet. Also like fit into your life. Be livable.
Welcome in society.
Because that, to be honest, is, there's lots of people that know a lot of good things about dogs, and there's heaps of good tutorials out there, but that's, I think, where we can add value. We don't see any of that, and so we're going to show you that along the way. And I think one of the things that we've noticed of the dogs that were sold in the past, some of the greatest feedback we get is, yes, they're exceptional operationally. They do their jobs very, very well, but they also are, they're easy keepers. They live in the kennels well. They live in the home of the handlers well. They travel in the car well.
They're not a danger to the rest of the team.
They're easy to handle.
When they're on holiday and the kennel hands are in there.
Yeah. So that's the goal. We're going to teach you that, and we're filming that along the way. So we're super busy, But
There will
that's
be
what we've
some
got.
tutorials on my channel, on my website that I'll put up of just, this is the way I train it, but this is the priority, like everything in between.
All right. Sounds like they're ready. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but they've woken up and they want to work. Au revoir.
So yeah.